everybody knows what AUTOREV is, right? Who is using that? Who is using that willingly? Let's try to find out why you do that. So I quickly introduce myself. My name is Vyacheslav Yurkov, but I present myself always like Slava because it's easier for everybody to remember. I worked in different companies during my career, but I'm now a full-time contractor and freelancer. Haven't come up with a company name yet. So feel free to reach me or using those contact details below. I started my Linux career or passion more than 20 years ago, and I try to regularly contribute to a bunch of open source projects, especially Linux kernel, Yocto project, and it mentions that I maintain OverlayFS classes and Open Embedded Core, but I recently took over the maintainership of OverlayFS tools as well. So there's some helpful tools which you could use with overlay. They are in Meta Open Embedded layer. Yeah, that's short about me. So AUTOREV, let's try to see what it is, how to use it, how it works, and maybe just discuss, should we use it, should we not use it, and what are the trade-offs, because sometimes it's really looks like a useful and nice tool to have. The last one is like a bonus, just showing how to handle multiple URLs in the one recipe. So AUTOREV. I took my examples just from looking at OE core recipes. And that's just EU dev recipe I found in OE core, but it does not use AUTOREV. So you see the source URI, it sets the fixed address and uses HTTPS. I just highlighted it. So it takes the whole archive bundle, and it's completely clear what's going to be downloaded. It also mentions a couple of files which are local to the BSP. So they're just fetched as files, basically. This is an example of a recipe that does not use AUTOREV.
Sorry.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the point. But let's come to that later. This one can use arbitrary revision because it uses Git version control system. This is also an example of a recipe I took from the OE core. That's a DTC compiler, device tree compiler. It uses a main branch and it uses a Git fetcher. And now you see another variable, source revision, and it's set to a fixed value. Oh, that is a typo. I forgot a quote. And you always fetch this revision. So there is nothing arbitrary about that. It's always going to be fetched from the main branch, from this URL, using HTTPS protocol with this fixed revision. What happens when we use a keyword AUTOREV? So that's an example with OverlayFS tools I mentioned. I still use the Git URL, but now instead of setting a fixed revision, I set a keyword AUTOREV. And it looks like a variable, but it's just used later on to substitute the actual revision. One important note here is that not only setting the AUTOREV, I also set the PV to that specific value. This is, okay, first of all, what it does, it fetches the latest commit from the master branch. And the latest at the moment when you try to build it. Now going back to the PV. This special value is needed because when you do a lot of subsequent builds, you want to distinguish those packages. And for that, you need a PR server running. So that variable is later used in the PR server. If you want to know what it is and how it works, you should watch Michael's talk from the 2 days before.
Yes, for the record, the source PV variable is not needed anymore since Kafka.
Since Kafka, okay, that's something new, thanks. So it's always default to AUTOREV or default to what?
No, you should still have the plus, something plus git.
Ah, something plus Git, okay. In the PV you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
But this also tells it that it's bigger than 1, 0. How else would you do that? I mean, if I have a stable version 1, 0,
Yeah.
I have an unstable AUTOREV.
This is just example values. Yeah, so I didn't mean it to be like complete working example. This is just example value how to work with AUTOREV. Yeah.
Because if you don't do this line, the plus in between,
Yeah.
you don't
Let me give you a microphone so everybody else can enjoy your wisdom, or at least your verbal output.
Yes. Yeah, so the question is, if you don't use, I mean, the PV line also says what I'm building now is bigger than 1, 0.
And now someone has to run with the microphone.
I need a different strategy for my talk later.
You still need the PV line. You just don't. You should not have the source PV variable. So it should still say something plus Git, and then Bitbake will automatically, magically convert the plus Git to the plus Git and part of the
revision
SHA
number.
revision.
Yeah, I left at the bottom the links to the official documentation where that auto-incrementing and the percussion version number is described just for the future reference. So most of the slides have it where I took it from. All right. So why it can come in handy? Of course, when you want to fetch the latest revision from the specified branch. What if we need both of them? So this slide might appear out of order thanks to Ross because I just wanted to demonstrate what if you want to have a fixed build. So again, this on top is the same excerpt from the EU dev recipe source URI. But you also want to have or have an ability to fetch the latest one. For that, you could use the BB class dev upstream. In order to use that, you have to use BB extend with dev upstream :target, and then set for this specific class set the URL of the version control. If I'm not mistaken, probably only Git is supported right now, but I need to look it up. Yeah, that's right. Good. And then you also set the source revision. It does not have to be AUTOREV. That can be set to any other fixed revision that is going to be used with that source URI. And then you also set the PV. It's similar to the previous slide, but this PV is going to be used in your local conf or whatever other configuration snippet where you set the preferred version. Then this particular set of source URI, source revision will be used. Again, that might appear out of order because I come back to the similar approach later. So what about the fetchers? So those are fetchers we currently have in a Bitbake documentation. There might be a bit more because, for example, for Git, we have Git submodules, and there's also such implementation as Git annex. So I didn't specify them all here. Some of them I even don't know what to do, like S3, for example. Not all of them, of course, support AUTOREV. Like Robert mentioned, there are file fetchers. So AUTOREV doesn't do anything. So the AUTOREV is supported in those. So basically, only in those that support source revision. So in the fetcher implementation, there's a function which checks if the source revision is supported in the fetcher, then you can use AUTOREV. For CVS, I have a bonus slide here. So technically, AUTOREV is not supported, but you can use for the CVS fetcher a special value called now for the date argument. It technically forces the fetcher to just check the version control every time. But it's not AUTOREV, because CVS is a bit older version control system, and there is no such notion as a revision. It's file-based. All right, so how does it work behind the scenes? When you call the beatbag and some recipe. So then the beatbag starts the server, and the server has a component called cooker, which in turn calls the parser. So that's a parsing stage, basically. All the recipes are being parsed in order to know the revision and the version of each recipe. So the parser checks the fetcher modules which are used in each recipe and combines that to basically to construct the PV, the version basically which is used. But so far there is no excess, because this is just a simplified version without AUTOREV. So parser always accesses the fetcher modules, but not always accesses the network. And then when this information is available, the parser passes it over further to the cooker, and then it spawns other build tasks. So it's just worth noting that the network access is usually restricted to the fetch and might be also on pack task. I'm not sure. That was a Richard note here. So what happens in the AUTOREV case? It's almost the same, but the fetcher module also has to access the network in order to construct the revision, which is going to be fetched later, in the later stage, and in the actual do fetch task. I mentioned there HTTP FTP fetcher, but obviously that also doesn't work with AUTOREV. So just to see what happens. The link here to the good description of how beatbag works internally with all those components for the cooker, parser, and fetcher, and also a good article on that in the Architecture Open Source Application book, the volume 2. So, do we need it or not? So why would you use AUTOREV? Why would you not use it? So, in the case the AUTOREV is not used, the big plus is you get a reproducible build, because you always know what you're building. And on top of that, when you, of course, develop and you do that in the same workspace, then this information is also cached, and the subsequent builds are going to be faster. But the downside, when you have a fast development environment, when you develop something and you need a lot of changes, you need to find a nice way how to update the recipe information, because otherwise you're always behind. So when AUTOREV is used, no reproducible builds anymore. So when you build something once, in a few hours, you can end up with some more information in your master branch, if you use a Git, for example. But it's really convenient when you have 50, 100, 200 repositories, and the development is really fast, and a lot of teams work on that at the same time. So from the CI perspective, that is really convenient, because you always try to build the latest and to make sure that it's still compiled, and ideally also all the tests pass. And as a downside, because it's AUTOREV, the recipe is parsed every time. And then the fetchers also access the network every time to know what to build. So what can we do? So can we combine that to use that to get a stable build and to also somehow achieve the fast development environment where all the CI teams are happy? Let's see what we can do. So that's was just my metric. So my observation, I had a project where you have a big team, like more than 50 people, then it's really convenient to use AUTOREV, like I said, and especially when you have pull request, merge request. I'm not starting any fight with the pull request, but a lot of development processes use it. And the team size is big, much bigger than 20 people. Then, of course, this is really convenient to use AUTOREV, especially in the integration pipeline, to make sure that the latest development still works, still compiles. That's just my personal observation. So what can we do? We have a build history plugin. It can be enabled by inheriting the build history class and setting build history commit to 1. There's a link with more documentation, what actually happens when you enable that and the build artifacts you get following that link. But at least what you get, in the build directory, you would get the directory called build history with the information about all the packages built. So here I built my OverlayFS tools package setting the AUTOREV, and it generated the file called latest source revision. So basically it just stored my source revision, which is it found during the parsing and it used during the build. So the build history also provides, it's not a build history. I think it's another binary, but I don't remember correctly. If you source the environment, it is available. It's called build history collect source revision, and that does exactly that. It collects all the source revision information from the build tree. Not only with AUTOREV, it can collect everything. So there are more parameters. Again, you can find them following that link. So what you can do, you can save this file, not only the one I just showed you from the OverlayFS tools, but from all the AUTOREV software you use. Save it to, for example, to sourcerevision.conf and put that into your local conf. That way, you at least have the way to reproduce your build after that. The second point here is what you can do. It's a bit orthogonal to the build history, but you can set the source revision policy to cache. That works if you build your image at least once. Then revisions are cached, and you can rebuild it again, but that might have some side effects. So it will not access the network, for sure. It will use all the revisions which are already cached. But if you change something, and you still expect something from other teams in other repositories, you need not to forget to put it back or comment it out in the local conf. Otherwise, you again might see some unexpected results. You expect one thing, but the fetcher just didn't check what has actually changed upstream. The cache policy is also useful to check if you can rebuild everything offline, so without the network access. But again, it's a bit tricky to use because you put it there, you forget it's there, and you need some more changes. Even though you fetch new changes from your layers, it will still not go to the network because you have BB source ref policy set to cache. So, what if we don't use AUTOREV? We need to find a way to upgrade the recipes. So, how you do that? So, there's of course the manual upgrade. You just check the recipe manually, upgrade it. Works well, sometimes slow, but depends again on the project. If you just need to bump up the version, that's pretty trivial. You can do that with the dev tool. I did not include that link, but in the dev tool manual, there's a list of commands how to follow that. Probably I have it. I should have had the slide how to do that. There might be another way. I saw some customers did that. They had a custom scripts that just bump up the versions of required components. And I know that Open Embedded Core and I think Meta Open Embedded too, they use auto-upgrade helper. I actually haven't seen any clients using that for their own layers. Maybe if you know, tell me. I haven't tried to bring it up myself, the auto-upgrade helper. So the way how to upgrade it with your custom scripts, of course, that depends on the version scheme of the project. Some project use a conventional version scheme, major, minor, patch version. That might be trivial. It also depends on the version control system is used. It's not always Git, although it's roughly 90%, but some customers still use all the CVS, Mercurial, something else. But when you find basically how to solve the first two, then it's pretty trivial. You just bump up the version, update source revision, and integrate it in your development workflow, be it either pull request or some other way. Yeah, I have a slide. That's how you do it with a dev tool. So you check the latest version of the recipe name, assuming that follows some kind of a versioning scheme. I think it checks, if in case of Git, I think it checks the list of tags, checking the current version of the recipe and what is accessible upstream. And then you try upgrade, or if you want to upgrade from the specific version to the specific version, not just to latest, and then fixing all the probably conflicts, whatever, and then you finish updating it. Those are the links how you do that. Those are basic commands, but maybe some other things. You need some complex or specific stuff there. Yeah, auto-upgrade helper, like I mentioned, used mostly Open Embedded Core and Meta Open Embedded. It utilizes the previous workflow from the dev tool behind the scenes. And there's some documentation on how to use it, but again, I never seen anyone using it. I didn't try it myself. Okay, another approach would be, so how to solve the downsides of not using AUTOREV. You could have two versions of the recipes. Before I mentioned that dev upstream class was out of order, it probably should be somewhere here, but it was just convenient to have it with the EU dev recipe I had before. You can have a common part of the recipe in some include file. And then you can have two recipes. One that a fixed revision, which just includes everything common and sets source revision. And then you have a Git version, setting at least the PV source revision to AUTOREV if you want to. So if you want the Git version. And the default preference -1. That means the fixed recipe version will always have higher priority than the one with the default preference -1. If you need that, then you enable it with the preferred version in your local conf or the other configuration snippet. So this preferred version depends on how you set the PV. That looks similar to what I described before with the dev upstream. So dev upstream seems like a nice solution, but it has some drawbacks. So dev upstream does not support currently native or native SDK targets. And dev upstream class, I think it cannot handle implicit dependencies. For example, if you fetch something from SVN, the dev upstream class cannot know that. So in this solution, all the dependencies are set correctly. One bug we found also this morning, that if you do beat bake layers show recipes, so those two, the fixed revision and the Git version, will be shown as available recipes. The bug we found with the upstream doesn't show that yet, but probably it will when it be fixed. Right, so that's how you handle several URLs. I mentioned like a bonus slide. You describe the source ref format, set particular names, and then you use the name argument in the source URI. And you set the source revision accordingly to each name of the repository. That's again an example of the existing recipe in the, I think, in the meta file system layer. So, what are some takeaways? Should we use or not use AUTOREV? Sometimes, like I said, it may come in handy, especially in the integration pipelines when you want to test the latest and greatest changes, but do not use in the release branches. I also don't think in the main branch it should be enabled by default, because and it can lead to a lot of confusion during the development when several people work on the same Yocto project and they are not sure whether they build the same or not. So simply just don't use it and enable it only for your testing integration pipeline. What can also be one drawback here is that check that dependencies are set correctly, because that can also lead to build time increase a lot. Right, and if you need again AUTOREV, so having two versions of recipe for now seems like a good approach to me. Maybe if you know better, just let me know. Those are links again to ones which maybe included already in the other slides. And thanks Ayub, Alexander, Ross, and Richard for their review and all the valuable comments I have. Then if you have any questions, feedback, complaints.
So, what I like to do with release, I like to have a offline build. Okay, so no estate and all the sources locally somewhere.
Yeah.
And if you use AUTOREV there with whatever tricks you showed, I think it's not going to work, because it will go out somewhere to the network and try to pull in something. But he has to check the.
I think there was a link on that on a FAQ to Yocto where it's described how to use BB cache policy, BB source ref policy cached. And if you combine it with the allowed network, it might work, but I don't know. So I would also advise don't use it, especially in the release build.
Yeah.
You're making my life miserable.
Yeah, the source rev cache, BB source rev cache policy or something. You just tell it to cache always, and it will just remember the previous revs for offline builds.
What that means, you have to have a cache.
Don't talk to the hand, talk to the mic.
Yeah. But that means you need to have something in the cache. So
Yeah,
but-
so it's
so
not gonna be
a
the
fully
first
fresh
build, probably.
offline build.
You need to distribute that file. I can't remember how it works.
More questions? Yeah.
You have mentioned that with auto revision, it will check automatically. Then the do fetch no stamp, it will not affect that. Because normally I have
That's a
like
good
do.
question. I haven't checked that with the no stamp. Yeah.
The second maybe question regarding having two recipe. What about like having BB append, which have like auto revision inside?
But BB appends to the current recipe. So it's not another version. It's the same recipe.
Only in the Git, like if it's only Git versioned.
I don't think it changes anything. So BB append is to the current recipe. So if you want to have BB append, it might be might make sense to use that dev upstream class. So then you have one recipe which essentially be like 2 versions.
Like I have one Git, and it is like building the recipe version, and with BB append, it's like not related. It's like you can set the tag inside the original recipe, and BB like you can set the auto revision.
No, we still override it.
Override. Yeah.
It's BB append. It will override it. It's not another revision.
Okay.
More questions, thoughts, praise, marriage proposals?
I have maybe something not directly related, but normally when I like in the URL define only the tag in the Git repo, I get a problem. Like it asks always master branch, and like in the documentation it is written like you can define only the tag, but I don't know. Like
the problem is a tag can move, so you cannot trust a tag.
So it shouldn't, but it can. That's why usually you specify the hash or the source revision.
Okay, then if like with tag you need always the related branch.
No, you can have no branch option. But I don't think that has anything to do with AUTOREV, no?
No. Like it's he asked if some thought.
You can have no branch option, but I would need to check whether it's
no
gonna
branch
work.
option. I have it. Like
Yeah.
Okay.
This silence is intimidating, right? Should we try and run away? Seems so. If there are no more questions, we will thank Slava and
Thank you very much for your attention.
and let him run away from the silence.